Hi everyone, welcome to the Performance Cafe. Specifically, I would like to welcome you to the Coffee Companion series, where we share coffee, biscuits and learnings every Friday as we talk about human performance in organizations. Today we're joined by Junita Van Der Colff. Junita is owner and managing director of Protean Business Solutions. Through her expertise in strategic planning, business continuity management, and enterprise risk management, she has been a catalyst for change in organizations globally and across multiple sectors and industries. Junita is passionate about empowering individuals and organizations to think differently about the way they do business, manage risk, and how they respond to their changing environment. As a change agent, Junita uses her consulting insight, expertise, and innovative approach to add value and drive positive change. She believes that organizational culture, buy-in at all levels, and corporate responsibility are some of the most important aspects to ensure sustainable business practices and continued growth. It is so great to be speaking to you, and I know that you've been really busy, so I appreciate you taking the time for us. Junita, so I've given a bit of an intro on you, but I know that you're also a TED speaker. You speak internationally. Do you want to tell us a bit more about yourself from your perspective?
Thank you, Innocent. It's great to be here, and thank you for having me on your show. I'm Junita Van Der Colff, the managing director and founder of Protean Business Solutions. I'm also a podcast host and of a podcast called Risk Review, where we talk all things risk and all things interesting. So also follow that. My background's actually in economics and law. And by default ended up in risk management in a time where risk management was quite new, and really enjoyed risk management because it gave me opportunity to get to know businesses inside out. It wasn't just in one specific industry or in one specific component of business or department in business. A holistic view, get to work with amazing and very interesting people. And so a few years ago, about 4 years ago, started my own business, took the jump from corporate and really started to grow international business, had the opportunity to have to talk in front of amazing audiences all over the world, and thoroughly enjoy what I do. I think I'm very passionate about what I do. And for me, it's all about just changing the way people think about their businesses and think about risk management, because I think there is very much a perception about what risk management is, and I challenge that. And like I said, enjoy what I do.
Wonderful. So let's start with that question, because I think some people think risk management is such consulting speak. What does it really mean?
So if you look at the ISO standard, ISO 31000, they have a definition, and I like to use that definition because it does open it up a little bit more than the traditional, we need to manage risk through insurance, which was the traditional view of risk management, and that's only for big corporates. So the ISO standard talks about it's the uncertainty in achieving our objectives. So we have strategic objectives that we want to achieve, but there is risks and opportunities in achieving that. So risk management is not just the downside, but it's the upside as well. So it's not just protecting value, it's about creating value. So what are the things the uncertainties that we face as businesses for us that might hinder us from achieving our strategic objectives at the end of the day?
Awesome. So that does lead me to my next question. You've actually touched on it already. I'm a solopreneur, and so obviously I have no risk, because risk is only for corporates, isn't it?
I wonder what people would say after COVID, because I think us as small businesses also suffered significantly, just as the big corporates. Risk management is for every business, for any government institution, for every person. I mean, when you get into your car in the morning and you put on your safety belt, you are managing your risk. And therefore, small companies aren't excluded from risk management. And when we talk about risk management in the formal sense, where there's policies and frameworks and procedures and risk registers and all of that, in my view, that is really like 20% of what risk management is all about. Risk management is about integrating a culture where people take ownership of the management of risk, where they, so if you have a job or you're responsible for something, is for you to identify the opportunities, but also the risks involved in what you do on a day-to-day basis, and managing that. And that does not mean you need to have a formal Excel spreadsheet with risks listed. And I think that's a perception a lot of people, is that it's only for big corporates. It's really, and let's make it practical for small businesses. I had a team meeting with my team yesterday. We spoke a lot about what was going on with our clients. And as we spoke about what was going on with our clients from an advisory point of view, or what was going on from a laptop point of view, like IT issues like we have, it's all about identifying the risk. So, for example, we all have laptops. Obviously, we have tight deadlines and we need to make deadlines. And one of our laptops are giving problems. It's having a strategy. So we said we're going to get a standby laptop. So if anybody is having laptop problems, we're essentially managing our risk. Same with identifying, talking about meetings that we're having today, and some risk involved in getting maybe too involved with the client or getting too sucked into politics. It's all part of managing risk. So it's integrating in risk management into your decision making and into the way that you run your business as well.
So I love that. And I love the fact that it's not just this doom and gloom. It's about actually building something more positive, building more resilience, for want of a better word. So I want to ask you, does risk management, from what you're saying, I think of risk management as running the numbers and making sure that the numbers work out. It sounds like you're saying it's broader than that.
Definitely. And I think when you go into, like, let's say, a bank or insurance company, they have very clever actuaries that builds models to and that explains risk management and the risk involved in certain products that they sell. And so there's something a bit broader than that called enterprise risk management. And that enterprise risk management look at risk in maybe three major categories. You have your strategic risk, where you very much, it's managing your stakeholders. There's things externally that also take place. So let's say there's a change in legislation, or there's a new competitor or disruptor entering your market. That is all part of strategic risk. Then you have your operational risk, which in my view includes things like IT, data management, people management, anything related to your operations, depending on the industry that you're in. And then you have project risk as well. So if you're running a big project, is to understand the risk involved in your project, meeting budgets, timelines, what resources you require for that particular project. So three major areas of risk management. And then in your operational risk, you have your more specific, let's say, you have a financial risk that is related to Forex, or if you have running a plant and you have a health and safety risk. That's a very specific risks, but enterprise risk management aims to bring all of those risk and that risk information together to have a holistic view, and to, at the end of the day, be able to manage and prioritize your resources to allocate those to where you have the biggest exposure and risk. So I think risk management in itself can mean various things, but when you look at enterprise risk management, you look at risk holistically, and it ultimately should enable better decision making. I always say, people ask me, what's my perfect situation? My perfect situation would be to have a room with all these monitors and screens, and we walk in and it gives us all the data, all the information, all the dependencies, everything for a business. And essentially that is what risk management should aim to do, is give us information that we can make better decisions at the end of the day.
Wonderful. And a very proactive process by the sound of it. But what would have been the effect if I had, let's say I was a company of 500 people? I mean, no one saw COVID coming. Would it have still helped to have had a risk management process, or is it just a black swan and that's it?
It's not about risk management in isolation. I think you mentioned a word a little bit earlier that I'm very passionate about, and I'm actually doing a few talks on internationally on resilience 2.0, where risk management plays a big part in that. And yes, you're right, it is being proactive. It's understanding your operating environment. It's understanding But sometimes a control fails or something outside of your control happens, like with COVID, okay? And COVID's not going to be the last disruption we're going to have. It's not going to be the last crisis that we're going to have. Prior to COVID in January, the World Economic Forum identified climate change and environmental risk as our biggest risk. We're facing huge cyber attacks and data breaches at the moment as well. So COVID really diverted our attention from all the other things that we still need to prepare for and still need to do. So as much as COVID came in and really probably took us like off guard, I must say, me being a risk manager myself and talking about risk and all of that, I didn't really foresee a national or global lockdown, if I had to be completely honest. But if you do aim to create a resilient business, it's not just about the proactive, but it's also having plans in place. So if something goes wrong that you didn't have control over, that you will be able to respond and that it will minimize the impact on your business. I'm going to use the example of financial resilience, okay? So a lot of organizations, and I mean, growing up, if you started a business, you were told that you need to have at least 3 months' salary in a bank account somewhere, and like that's everybody had these emergency funds everywhere. And I think now we know why, right? So I think a lot of businesses didn't have that. And it's part of being resilient. So if something should happen in your organization, is to ensure that you understand what is and I call it risk appetite. So how much risk can I take on? And how do I financially provision for those times when it's not going according to plan? Because reality is things will go wrong. Okay, be it COVID, be it something else, things do go wrong. And it's just how do we prepare for that? And it's not just about managing your risk, because sometimes it doesn't matter how well you're doing that, things will still happen. And it's making sure you have plans in place for that. So that is part of the bigger resilience, in my view.
And so that makes sense, because it does bring me to the question of how do we identify risk in business?
Okay, so I think there's various ways that you can do that. Understanding the context in which you're operating it in is extremely important. I always say to people, you need to know everything about everything, especially if you're a smaller business. And I have this analogy that I used at a conference the other day that I would quickly like to talk about. So let's say you have 3 sets of types of boats, okay? So the one boat's the Titanic. It takes a very long time to move, and there's an iceberg, and like it didn't move quick enough, so it hit the iceberg, okay? That's the one. The second one is a sailboat. But the sailboat is more exposed to, let's say, bad weather conditions. It's agile and can move quickly, but it's very much exposed. But then you have a fleet of sailboats that can navigate quickly, but they're all going into the same direction. And I think, for me, that's a brilliant analogy about how some of the corporates are managing risk and identifying risk. It's very much because we don't even see the iceberg because we're in this big ship and none of us really care to look outside, okay? And then you don't identify the risks. Where you're on a sailboat, you're so exposed, you almost see just risk because you see the weather building up, you see the iceberg, you see everything else, and you're so focused on that. But if you're part of a bigger, let's say a fleet of sailboats, you all have each other's back, and you can kind of navigate, and you're still agile in moving around. So analogy about decision making and agility and the speed in which you can move. But I think it's also important analogy when identifying risk is that don't get too stuck internally in yes, you have internal risks and there's things there, but you need to look outside, and you need to look outside the box. So identifying risk in a more practical way is to create spaces and times where and platforms for people to raise things that they see. So scenario planning is a good example, where you do scenario planning and you look at different scenarios, and you're creating time and space to think outside of the box, to think outside of what needs to happen today. John Sanna, we had a podcast interview with him the other day, and he spoke about having a tomorrow team. Okay, so what does your tomorrow team look like? And it's people dedicated to understanding like what technology is out there that they can use in the business. How do we change our business models, but really thinking outside of the box. And I think that's what we require to identify risk. And then I think something that I'm very passionate about and that I've seen in a lot of organizations is leadership and the role that leadership plays with the risk identification. If you have a trusting environment where there's transparency, risk identification is a lot easier because it should be a day-to-day integrated into what you do. It shouldn't be, I hate these risk workshops because people almost come with a predetermined mindset that I'm just going to work through this because like it's just a compliance tick the box exercise. It should be integrated into your management meetings and conversations and performance approach, like any discussion that you have, you can identify risk. And that's where back to the ownership side of things, where if I own a risk, I see a risk, I can communicate it to leadership, there's transparency. That's ideally where you want to be when it comes to the identification of risk.
Wonderful. So now I'll ask a question. This is a performance cafe, and I'd be remiss if I don't ask a people-y question. What is, and I know this is a passion of yours as well, is what's the role of risk and culture in getting the right performance from our teams?
Definitely. So as I mentioned right at the start, was that 20% is like the frameworks and the policies and all the stuff that people spend probably 80% on. And 80% of risk management is really about the culture that you embed. And it comes down to the culture of that transparency. It comes down to leadership, leading in a way that people feel safe and that they can communicate. Back to the definition of risk. Risk is the uncertainty in achieving objectives. So it's so clear, it should be so clear that we understand what are those uncertainties, be it opportunities or risks, in us achieving those objectives at the end of the day. But the people, you can have the best policies and frameworks and risk methodologies and whatever the case might be. If you don't have a culture of identifying, of being able to talk about risk openly, and to raise certain things, then the other stuff really doesn't matter. So I think it's extremely important to acknowledge that and to spend a lot of time in creating a culture and doing and educating people about what risk management is, what their roles and responsibilities are around the management of risk in their areas. So people is a very key component to that, and I think it really assists with getting people to perform. At the end of the day, if I can communicate the things that is standing between myself and performance in a way that it can be managed and resources can maybe be allocated to that, at the end of the day, we can all move forward towards our strategic objectives together. So I think there's a lot more direction and transparency.
Lovely answer, and I love that. And so what I'm hearing you say is that risk management is not a boring checkbox compliance thing. It is about the lifeblood of organizations and how we keep them going.
Exactly, and it's creating that culture of understanding what it is and that we all have a role to play. And it's all about team effort. It's interesting how this has been coming up everywhere, where it's about connecting the dots. It's about moving forward together. I think we're moving away from the traditional way of doing performance management, because I think previously we tried to put people in boxes where we then run the risk of them not reaching their full potential or contributing to something that could have been significant at the end of the day. So I've been hearing a lot about teams and how do we work in teams together for a holistic goal. And back to my example of the boats, if we have various boats, a fleet of sailboats all going in the same direction, but we're trusting our people to make the right decisions. Another thing that has been coming up is trusting our staff and our experts to make decisions, because I think what happened is build these hierarchies and all these structures in businesses. And what I'm seeing from a risk point of view is nobody's willing to make any decisions because everybody is too scared. There's fear of I'm going to make a decision and it's going to lead to X, Y, and Z. So the analogy of the boats, having various different boats, everybody can make decisions, but everybody's moving in the right direction. Everybody has the same the same drive. Everybody has the same purpose to get to a certain goal. And I think that's really what businesses need to start aiming to do with performance management to reach those strategic objectives. The world that as we know it has changed. They talk about the next normal and the big reset and like all these like terms. Shouldn't be relooking the way that we manage our people and manage risk and I think strategies, we've been doing a lot of work around strategy and using scenario planning to change strategies because everything has changed. And we need to change the way we think about these things as well and challenge it.
Wonderful. And so I suppose what I'm hearing from you is the Clicks Tresemme situation. You know, there's a risk that went unidentified, and why? I don't know if you've given that any thought.
I don't want to comment on the actual situation and what happened because I don't think any of us really know. I do want to comment on one of the biggest risks that organizations faced, and that's also what I did my TED talk on, is the social license to operate. So when we talk about the social license to operate, back 10, 15 years ago, when a mine or a construction company wanted to do something in a community, they had to get buy-in from that community, and that was called a social license to operate. But things have changed because we don't just operate in certain geographical locations. Because we're so connected, we like the world has become like flat and like the internet is out there, number one. Number two is there is a change in expectations from stakeholders. And saying stakeholders is the general public is a big stakeholder to any business right now because they can make a breakthrough and they'll use social media to boycott or to support or so businesses in general are very much exposed to that. And I think one of the key things that I see is that we don't understand our stakeholders. We don't know, we don't understand, or we don't take into account what they expect from us, okay? And there's been a shift from shareholders to stakeholders. It's not about what the shareholder wants anymore. It's our stakeholders. And the last thing for me is the purpose. Businesses need to have a purpose. It's not about just enriching a few anymore. It's about building communities. It's about building society. It's about looking after the environment. And that's really the shift that we've seen with COVID now as well. So to conclude my answer to you on that is that all companies need to have the social license to operate on their radar, and they need to understand their purpose. They need to understand their stakeholders. You can't just do things anymore. You need to understand the risk of whatever you put out there, and you also need to be prepared to take ownership of it and to respond to that. So, like I said, things will go wrong, and you need to be able to respond to that appropriately. And I think there's a big human element to everything that we do, and we really need to take that into account, especially with COVID. We've realized that as much as we businesses and governments, etc., we're all only human, and we need to be compassionate and kind to each other, and respectful to each other all at the same time. So we're human before we're part of a business or before we executive in a company or the president. We're all human first. So I think that was some of the learnings from COVID and some of the other situations that we've seen recently.
Awesome. So then I want to ask you, you were talking about resilience. Now, my first coffee companion was Leonie Fourie, and she's a resilience coach, and she actually spoke about bouncing forward. She says you don't bounce back because by the time you've bounced back, you've learned. So you're actually exceeding where you came from. I think you've mentioned that you have pretty much the same idea. Is that around business continuity, or is that more around risk management?
So that's around something that we now gave a name, and it's called integrated strategic resilience, and it's business resilience in general. So I also use the analogy about a tennis ball. So if you just drop a tennis ball, it's not going to just bounce back into your hand, okay? You need to have intention and action. So to throw the tennis ball, for it to bounce back higher. And I like the fact that she says it's about bouncing back higher. But I think the key there is intention and action. So for you to bounce back stronger than before is really to understand your bigger resilience and to have a coordinated and integrated approach to resilience, which includes risk management, it includes your strategy, and includes performance, it includes ethics and people resilience. It includes it's various things. It's not just risk management and business continuity management, because that's not going to be enough. And it wasn't enough when you see how we responded to COVID. So we need to change our approach, and we need to have a holistic approach to business resilience, if that is, for lack of a better word.
So what does business continuity have to do with risk management?
So Innocent, we developed a model, and I see it as really, and I call it a life cycle, because it's a continuous process. It's not something you do and now it's done and now you move on. And this life cycle really look at risk and resilience holistically. And there's a very good reason why I use this to explain the link and relationship between risk management and business continuity management, because people do get confused and often don't necessarily understand all of it. So it comprises of 4 major areas. And the first one is our ability to anticipate. Now, ability to anticipate is our risk management process, and that's really our risk and opportunity identification. So that is us looking forward and identifying risks, things that can cause disruption, or things that is an opportunity. It might be new technology that we're bringing into our business, or that's available out there. It might be a change in legislation. We saw POPI coming into South Africa recently, and people needing to manage their data in a responsible way. That's all part of it, the anticipating. And that's not even anticipating because it's already here, but it's really looking forward and trying to identify the things that can have an impact on our business in whatever way. So when we identified our risks, you need to understand, what is my risk appetite? And that's something I mentioned earlier as well, is that you don't want to take on more than what your business can handle, all right? And you also want to make certain statements in your business around what you have appetite for and what don't you? So for example, you might not have any appetite for any reputational damage at all. So you're very much a business that's out there in the media, and any media that you might get might impact your business in a negative way. So we want to ensure that our reputation is looked after and our brand's looked after, and therefore we don't have any impact. So when we look at our risks, or we identify risks that might have an impact on our reputation, then obviously we will have a low tolerance for that risk and a low appetite for that risk. Okay, it's almost like having a credit card with a limit. Okay, that's the best example of a risk appetite, is having a limit on a credit card. You can't spend more than that, and often businesses don't understand that. But once you do understand that level at which what is acceptable for your business, if you have a risk that's outside of your risk appetite, you need to manage that risk. So that means you need to put action plans in place for you to manage that risk within where I call your sweet spot. Any business needs to take risk, okay? But there's a sweet spot of taking risk, because we need to take risk to grow our businesses. So risk management is not just about saying we shouldn't take risks and we need to manage all the risks. That's not what it's saying. It's saying we need to manage the risk that's outside of our risk appetite, and that leads us to withstand. So withstand is our risk mitigation. It's building operational resilience. This is something that we've been doing a lot of work in, a very new area. But operational resilience really talks about your single points of failure. An example would be it's identifying your critical processes in your business and understanding what are the dependencies for that process. So what are the small things that can go wrong that can prevent that process from or that can cause a disruption for that process. An example would be you have one person that releases payments on your banking app, all right? Very simple example. But if that person's not available, that is a single point of failure. So then we can't release bank payments. And therefore, we need to identify those single points of failure and write a response plan to that. So if that person that does that particular action is not available, who would be the stand-in person? They need authority, they need a mandate to actually do that and get that in place. That then leads us to response to key risk indicators. So key risk indicators, a simpler word for that is really red flags. So what are the red flags that's telling me that something is busy going wrong in my business? Example would be, let's say fraud is an example of in a big corporate as a risk. If we had like one fraud case a while back, but all of a sudden we have 13 new fraud cases, it's telling me that something is going wrong in a certain area of the business and we need to respond to that. And that leads me to response planning, is to say we need to plan for if something should go wrong, and to minimize the impact. So all of what you see, the anticipate and withstand, all of that is proactive, and it aims for us to manage the risk in a way that we prevent things from going wrong. But sometimes that things go wrong and we have an incident and we need the ability to respond. So it's a response to the incident or disaster. It's your incident management process. That is, if something goes wrong in the business, we know who to report it to. So who's the first person that I go to and tell about this? And that's often very important because you can manage an incident quite quickly and prevent it from escalating if you have a good incident management process. Example would be we send the wrong information or data to the wrong client. And if we respond quickly, we can maybe retract that email before it's been read. And I know that's a very stupid example, but that is an example of how we can quickly mitigate and manage something. Emergency response planning talks about a physical threat. So that is, there's a bomb threat, or there's a hostage situation, or we have a fire in our building, or we have a health incident. So somebody in the office gets sick and it might be COVID. That's really your emergency response plan. And emergency response planning really takes care of the safety of our people and our visitors. So really people-oriented and the safety of people. Then you have crisis management. Now, crisis management looks after our brand and reputation. It might not come from a physical incident. So example of a crisis management plan activation would also include a cyber attack. We had a cyber attack, or our data's been taken hostage and we need to get it back. It could be, might be litigation. It could be public outcry, like we've seen with some companies where we need to respond to that. And part of crisis management is crisis communication. And we've seen organizations over the years that if they respond well to a crisis, it actually increased the share price. It increased stakeholder confidence. So it's really important to ensure that we are prepared and we know our role and we have the appropriate training and on what to do with a crisis, and if we're faced with a crisis. So that's really your senior leadership team that would respond to a crisis. And I always say, keep the team small, because you want to be agile and you want to be able to respond quickly, and you don't want to wait for things to spiral out of control. So that's respond. Your crisis management team, your senior leadership team, will then look at the incident and say, is there an operational disruption? If the answer is yes, then we need to start recovering through our business continuity management and disaster recovery. Business continuity management looks after, we have our critical processes. These are the resources they require to operate. And we look at things like we need people. So what people do we need? What's the minimum amount of people that we need? We need a location to work from, be it remotely or be it in the office. We need utilities. So does our office have generators for power? And what if there's a water disruption? We might need specialized equipment. So some organizations have specialized printers or equipment. If my specialized equipment is not available, what is my plan? We need IT systems. Do we have a manual workaround, or are we reliant on our IT systems? And that leads me to disaster recovery. So disaster recovery is, our IT systems are down. What is our plan? Okay. Do we have an alternative site? Do we have backups? How long will it take us to get those backups? How long will it take us to get going again? And even the smallest organization, and I promise you, because I am the managing director of a small organization, and we had to make a plan with laptops. We have a data backup policy in our business. Even the smallest company needs to do proper disaster recovery, and nobody is excluded from that. In today's day and age, it is becoming easier with software as a service that we use, with cloud solutions, and it is becoming easier. We don't need physical servers anymore, and it is becoming more cost effective to manage that in the right way. But we really need to look at and understand the risk. And I think the one thing that's important there is that we need to understand what systems do we need, and what is the business requirements versus what is the IT capability, the IT system capability. And if there's a gap there, we need to make sure that we fill that gap. So, for instance, if we need a system up and running within 4 hours, but we can only recover the data within 8 or 2 or 3 days, then obviously there's a gap and there's a risk there that needs to be fulfilled. And then it's a continuous process. So as we experience things like we did with COVID, is we need to get better at anticipating, and this whole life cycle should continue. You need to continuously test these plans and ensure that you're up to date. So anticipate and withstand is really your risk management, and respond and recover is really your business continuity, your resilience side of things. But all in all, this whole model will improve the resilience of your organization. I hope that answers the question, Innocent. Any questions on this?
Well, actually, no. I must say, look, I'm a visual learner, so this is your explanation along with this actually really sort of demystified it for me beautifully. I must say, the one thing that comes to mind when you say disaster recovery is, I quickly went out to run an errand earlier today, and I thought I'd lost my cell phone, and so then disaster recovery came to mind quite quickly.
We lost my iPhone back up.
Exactly. Where's my Google backups? So I really get that, and I do love the way that you put it. But something that did come to mind for me is, we think of risk management as a leadership thing. But honestly, when I take a look at my philosophy about the importance of employees understanding strategy, leadership supporting them, clarity in culture, and clarity in performance management, then to me, actually everyone is a player in the risk game, because there might be a risk, as silly as it sounds, that someone on the floor doing the capturing might know that someone high up wouldn't even be aware of. And I think, is that commonplace, that people see it as a higher level thing where actually, it's everyone's job?
So especially where in companies where they have risk managers, okay, and I've been a risk manager in a government institution, and what happens is that everything is the risk manager's responsibility. So be it an IT issue, so we recently created some e-learning content, and we have this slide that everyone is a risk manager to create that culture. So exactly what you just said, because and I guess that's the frustration about being a risk manager as well, is that you're really there to facilitate the process. Now, the word facilitate, if you go look at the meaning of facilitate, it actually means to make it easier, okay? So the only role a risk manager is supposed to be playing is to provide a platform, a structure, a methodology that we all look at it in the same way, and to facilitate the process. They're not there to actually manage the risk. I think that's where there's a bit of a naming convention issue when it comes to risk manager, because they actually don't manage the risk at all. Business manage the risk. And as you said, as a risk manager, you're not an expert in contracts or in IT or in data management or in, like you say, capturing something. Though they are experts in those fields, and they're the ones that need to manage the risk. So you're right in saying that it is everybody's responsibility. And that's why there's such a big drive in what we do in creating that ownership, that culture of ownership, because that's the only way you can really effectively manage risk in a business.
So another point that comes to mind as well is that I think we're moving into, you were talking earlier about how the nature of consumers have changed. And as I've actually heard it talked about as a prosumer, because they're starting to tell us what they want, when they want it, how much they want it for, and where they want to buy it. And so I think employees must become proes or something. I don't know what the word is. I'll have to still make it up. Because we do find that employees want to be more empowered. They want to know more. They want more transparency. But the beautiful thing is that in order to keep my job, in order for my job to be sustainable in a business, I can contribute by being the mini risk manager. And so it is a shift of that empowerment. And I think it's important that our businesses realize that our employees can play, a role there.
And I agree. They should really be the change agents, and they can influence that. And we've seen, so what I've seen now in the industry, it's funny because remote working was always a business continuity strategy. Okay, never did we think it will be for 6 months. But I see a lot of organizations now struggling to get their employees back in the office because they're just saying that I've proved that I can work from home. I don't want to waste my time on in the traffic. My kids got used to me picking them up from school. I have work-life balance, and they're just in a much better mindset. So, and they really like saying to business or saying to their employees, it shouldn't be a requirement anymore. And even from a recruitment point of view, if you want to retrain and attract the right employees, you're going to have to relook at your strategy and your work methods and how you're going to manage performance, because it's more about the output than the hours being put in. And I think that's really been a realization during COVID. And I do think employers is really feeling the pressure right now, with employees just saying that things need to change. So where is the change? So they really can be the change agents, and they should be, because it's not but just about the risk, it's opportunities as well. So just as much as the responsibility of leadership to drive things, it's your responsibility to identify opportunities and bring that to the table.
Awesome. So one quick thing, you were talking earlier, and of course we know each other, so I know that there are 4 young ones in your house. When we started looking at COVID, we did the podcasts that you recorded for me, literally, a week or 2 before COVID. It was hot off the press when COVID hit. And we had no inkling of what was coming and the impact of it. But I remember in the beginning getting really upset. And I know I turned to you because I trusted your opinion in this. And I said, hold on, what's going on with this metrics? Because we're seeing risk, we're seeing the numbers for COVID and how many people are passing and stuff, but the numbers aren't making sense. And we spoke about how people interpret risk and how not teaching someone how to interpret risk is actually quite risky, pardon the pun. What do you think we could do at a level, at a childhood, at an early educational level, maybe, to help, better educate our kids about risk?
So I think it's such an important thing. So there's this TED talk, and we can maybe share the link with the listeners, around risk literacy and understanding risk and the numbers. So interesting fact that the story that's being told in this TED talk is that during 9/11, aviation, so obviously a lot of people passed away during 9/11, and till this day it remains one of the world's biggest tragedies. But when you look at what happened after that, is that people didn't want to fly anymore in the US. So everybody got into their cars and drove. And they had some of the highest death rates ever on the roads at the same time. So I think they recorded something like, so in aviation for like 10 years, they recorded deaths of that like in a month or 2, or something ridiculous. But it just shows that we respond in fear. And that's really what we've seen with COVID as well. People responded with a lot of fear, and it caused a lot of anxiety because we didn't understand it. And I often feel that we need to understand things, and that's people are scared for the word risk management or the perception because they don't understand what it means. It's not a policing criticize. It's not saying anybody's doing anything wrong. It's not what it's about. It's having open discussions about things that can go wrong. But I think really when it comes to children and teaching them, and the lack of ownership that we're seeing in corporates right now, it comes from a childhood age. It comes from how we parent our kids, and them not having to take responsibility and not having to take ownership as well. So I really do feel that risk management, like entrepreneurship and mental health and EQ and those things, are all things that we need to be teaching our kids from a very young age. And I think that will then, a lot of fear and anxiety would be will not prevent it, but it will be managed a lot better when we understand things better and take ownership for things. I think a lot of people struggle with boundaries and taking ownership of things, and that causes a lot of anxiety and fear as well. So yes, I do feel that we need to educate people, and a lot of what I do is education. So I do a lot of training for board members and executives and all levels within organizations, and e-learning around what is risk management, what is the perception, and why it's something that not to be feared, and why we should really embrace it, because it's really a management tool and it's a life tool as well. It's a skill. And if you look at your own personal life, is for example, if we teach risk management in school, you'll know that there's ways to mitigate your risk. So if I get my first new car, I need to get insurance for my car, because things can go wrong with my car. I need to ensure that I plan for if something should happen to me and I can't work. I need to ensure that, so it's all about risk mitigation, and we don't see it in that way. I wish people would have taught us about taxes at school, because you start working and then all of a sudden, like, I need to pay tax. How does that work? But it's a risk, because if you don't pay your tax, you can get into big trouble. You have a responsibility to pay your tax. So it's all things that we take for granted, but it could really save a lot, like I say, fear and anxiety at the end of the day, if we just do the education from a young age and for people to understand it a little bit better.
Awesome. So, Junita, I know that you are very active in the business, and I know trying to get time in your diary is a nightmare, so I know there's a lot that you do. Is there anything exciting that you're doing right now that you'd like to tell us about?
Oh my word, there's so much going on. We just expanded the business internationally. So we just opened an office in England, in the UK, which is quite exciting, because there's a lot happening with operational resilience in the financial sector in England right now, with the Bank of England releasing directives and all of that. So that's exciting. I have a few conferences coming up, which is always exciting to talk at, doing bit of training. So business continuity management, we're doing a bit of training in October on business continuity management. And yeah, so lots of exciting things going on. People can follow me on LinkedIn. I usually post what I'm getting up to there. So if they are interested in the journey, because it's all a journey for all of us, then they can just give me a follow on LinkedIn.
That's perfect, because what I will do is I will, in our notes for this vlog or for this session, I will definitely put in your LinkedIn address, I will put in your podcast address, and I will put in your TED Talk, as well as the TED Talk about teaching children about risk mitigation. Is there an email address that we can maybe share should anyone want to reach out to you?
Yes, definitely. So they can reach out to me personally at Junita@proteanbusiness.com. And yeah, feel free, please engage. It's so difficult doing all these things online, because I would just love to have a coffee and talk about things and understand where people are and the questions they have. So as much as it's great to connect in this way, I still miss the physical meetings and networking opportunities that we had in the past, but it will come. So hopefully soon.
We'll get there. Junita, thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you for sharing all your valuable information with us. We do hope to see you around shortly when we will follow up and find out how it's going with the business 2.0, if that's where we are right now. So thanks to Junita for sharing all of that valuable information with us. We hope that you've enjoyed today's episode of Coffee Companions. As I've said, all of the detail to reach out to Junita will be available in the session notes on YouTube. And of course, if you're going to find it in YouTube, please like and subscribe. If you're looking at us or if you found us on LinkedIn or Facebook, please like, subscribe, and comment and share. We appreciate that. And until next time, I look forward to seeing you at the Performance Cafe.